Hello, everybody, and welcome to ABM Answered, the quickfire demand generation and ABM video series, or at least that's what we aim for. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Steve Armenti, who is the founder and CEO of 12th, and I would argue one of the most accomplished marketers we've ever had on the show, having run B2C programs for giants like Verizon, but also spearheading the demand gen efforts at Google, driving billions in pipeline. So yeah, for me, you're the type of marketer I look at, Steve, and feel a bit rubbish about myself, indirectly, obviously that's not what you're setting out to do, but it would be good to, just before we dive into the questions, hear a bit more about you, your background, how you ended up landing gigs at these giants, and then also kind of why you decided to step away and do your own thing.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That's a very, very kind intro. I appreciate it. And there's some marketing in there as well, right? If I wasn't good at marketing myself, nobody would hire me to do marketing. And so I've tried to lean into that. But I've just been very grateful for the journey I've been on. I've had some really good mentors in the past that kind of push me to take the next step and go outside my comfort zone. And I think that's what's allowed me to just kind of continuously find the next step. And we could get into some of the details, but it's been fun going from the corporate side now to, running my own thing and working with clients and trying to bring some of those best practices that I developed over the last 16 years and see clients react to it and implement that and get value from it.
Yeah, you've got one thing that I definitely don't have, which is the experience of working like within a big company. I've always been on like the scrappy startup side. So yeah, I mean that's a whole another episode for another day. But
Yeah.
to run you through the rules and the viewers through the rules, Steve, in this case, will be given a bunch of questions to respond to, all about ABM and demand gen. The questions have come from or been adapted based on the data we collected at Mixed Reality Rooms, where over 1,000 marketers had gone through and stated what their biggest struggles with ABM were at the moment. But Steve, because we're big time now, we've started to include previous guest questions. Obviously, I joke, we're not that big, but we're up and coming. Are you ready for question one?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Cool. So question one came in from Sarab Sankey, who works at IGT Solutions. And to give you some context real quick, he has always been more on the demand gen side. But his question was, when or what is the right time for an organization to adopt an ABM approach? So when should a company start thinking about it?
I love this question. There's so much debate about this, and I will tell you anytime is right because I define ABM, or actually, I like the term ABX because I like to think about the customer, the post-sale experience as well. But we'll go with ABM, right? It's at any point when you realize that sales and marketing could be more efficient at talking to your potential customers. Like that's really it, right? Like that's why we do it. We want to align sales and marketing on everything we do across process, across channels, across tactics. And guess what? The easiest way to do that is by aligning on accounts, right? You develop an account list. And so I think if your company has the ability to really understand who your customer is, so the firmographics, the technographics, and the demographics of who that is, and you can put that on paper in an account list, ABM's for you. Give it a shot, right? You don't need all the bells and whistles either. You can literally get a spreadsheet with 20 accounts in it and just start marketing and selling to those accounts. That's ABM in my book.
Nice. There's questions as well. I try and avoid the follow-on questions because I don't want to cross over into the other guests' questions. But would you say there, needs to be a minimum threshold in account value for you to adopt ABM? Obviously, it's got to make sense financially. Like, do you have any
Mm-hmm.
advice on, like, is there any quantitative numbers or like benchmarks where it's like right time to turn on ABM? Obviously, you're an advocate through and through, like out the gates. But is there, I guess, a counterintuitive, play devil's advocate to that? Is there
Mm-hmm.
ever a wrong time to do ABM?
Yes, yeah. That's a great question, and that's kind of as you start to peel back the onion. Yes, there's
Yeah.
some caveats here, right? And I think really where that applies though is when you're spending a lot in media, right? And you're starting to now look at the total cost to acquire an account versus the lifetime value of that account. And so if you're having to spend a lot of marketing like capex, to acquire accounts, then yeah, it might not work for you, right? But my prior answer is really just along the lines of, hey, marketing doesn't have to be media, right? You don't actually have to always spend money to do marketing. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was an SDR, I would sync up with my AE and we would go to physical buildings like that had an office park with a group of accounts that were segmented by industry and like hand stuff out and just go to the receptionist and try to get meetings. And like, I'd call that ABM, right? Like we were finding accounts that were in the same industry. We aligned on our message and we went and tried to deliver it together, marketing and sales. So it's, I think sometimes people get caught up in the minutia and a little bit of the debate around this stuff. And like, yes, as you get more sophisticated, you need to be data driven and you should think economically. But if you're a startup or you're a founder or you have a small company and you're like, man, I think this might work. Yeah, I don't think there's any barrier to try it, but I would advise don't go spend, 50 grand on LinkedIn ads if your ACV is like, $2,000 a year.
Also, we're getting there. Now I'm figuring out why you're such a good marketer and how you've landed these jobs. You started as an SDR. They always say ex sales people make the best marketers, don't they? Solid advice. Question 2 came from, well, I've merged 2 questions together. So Matt Conway at TX1 Networks, cybersecurity company, and Katie O'Neill at Noetic. They asked, what is a simple way to explain to sales about like all the great work marketing is doing without overcomplicating it? So I think Matt Conway's specific question was like, I guess what's your number one tip for like harmonizing sales and marketing?
Yeah, oh, I love that. You got to know your stakeholders, right? And as a marketer, your biggest stakeholder is going to be sales. So I'll answer this one a little bit more enterprisey, right? So typically enterprises have pretty big marketing teams, pretty big sales teams. I would say there's 2 things to think about. And the first would be put yourself in the shoes of your counterpart in sales, right? And think about what does their day to day look like? Who is pressuring them internally? Do you know their boss, right? How does their boss operate? Are they like a drill sergeant kind of type? Are they kind of chill? What kind of metrics do they have on their plate? What does their daily flow look like? Do they do weekly business reviews? Do they do like stand up sprints every day? Like you've got to understand what is this person going through on a day to day basis? And it's probably a lot, right? They're probably stressed out about a bunch of stuff. So if you are now on the marketing side and you come over with your fancy marketing reports and you're flashing lead to MQL numbers and MQL conversion rates and blah, 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 they have no idea what you're talking about, nor do they really care, right? Because they're living in this completely different world. And so the first tip is like you got to understand your stakeholders and you got to speak their language and operate within their ecosystem, right? In their world and like how they go through things on a daily basis would be the first. And so, the simple thing there is like, don't talk about MQLs, talk about opportunities, talk about pipeline, talk about stage progression, talk about revenue, right? That's what sales cares about. The second is this was from my own personal experiences. You've got to humble yourself. I think marketers tend to get very amped up about what they're doing and they get very excited and they get these reports. But again, if what you're explaining isn't relevant to the audience, it's just not going to land well. So, I've had experiences where I've been there in the QBR sharing the MQL numbers, and the heads of sales are like, I don't care. Why would I care about this, right? Like your MQL number is in the green and it's really high, but sales is in the red. There's a big disconnect here, right? And so you got to understand the other side, and then humble yourself that like, hey, maybe you need to improve some things and then try to take those 2 things together in your day to day and forge relationships too. I think if you can take that with you and build some rapport with your sales counterparts, it's going to go a long way.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, it's so easy to get high on your own supply, isn't it? Hey, I've put together this great, beautiful deck or this white paper, like, and also I think your first point about molding around them as opposed to the other way around, like, yeah, I think in a way you've got to understand that marketing is somewhat secondary to sales and it's our job to support them rather than the other way around. So yeah. Wow.
Sometimes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, have you heard the term servant leadership?
No?
It's like it's described for leaders of organizations, right? And when you think about it, your job is really to serve the organization. And what does the organization exist for? a lot
Hmm.
of ways to make money, right? And so if you're not serving the process of generating revenue, then what are you doing? And so I think that's sometimes that's hard for marketers to hear, but in the demand gen revenue marketing space, I mean, sorry, that's your job.
Yeah. Well, marketers are socialists, salespeople are capitalists. Eh? We can learn from.
It's true.
What? Right, we'll have to do a bit of quick fire to get through these. But question three is from Juan Martinez from at Autodesk. He has a very forward-fitting question. What AI tools or processes do you use in your ABM execution? So not well, I guess that can include research, but yeah.
Hmm.
Are you using any at all? Like, do you have any experience there?
That's a good one. Yeah, I would say today, right now, I'm excited about a lot of the sales tools and that are coming out, like some of the AI sales tools. So you've got, think about the targeting space, right? You've got RB2B, you've got Koala, these,
Hmm.
site identification tools that you can then learn who's on your website. And then there's a couple other tools, Mad Kudu and Forward, which is predictive lead scoring. So you can now pipe all your marketing and sales data in through these tools, and they'll give you these predictive intent leads. And then you can start routing those through tools like contact-based advertising tools, like like an Influ2 or Enrich or something like that. I think is one workflow that's pretty exciting. And then on top of that, I've actually been spending a lot more time in Clay. So I think they've predominantly been,
Yes.
selling to sales. But I look at that and I say, man, this is account list building and enrichment on steroids. This is phenomenal. And you can build, multiple segments and start pushing them into ad platforms, into email platforms. And I'm very excited about that opportunity.
Yeah, Clay is incredible. It's a bit more technical, but I geek out on this stuff as well. But yeah, it's that enrichment level is pretty impressive. I do find with it though, you have to. It's not a case of just like you click a few buttons and everything works. Like it is a case of like, well, it's like ChatGPT. You've got to like prompt it and then prompt it again and then prompt it again to like really kind of
Hmm.
get good enrichment. But the whole process is just insane.
Yeah, yeah.
Question four is from Janelle Amos. She asked, what are the top three things you would prioritize today if you were building a marketing strategy from scratch relative to ABM, of course?
I love it. I love it. I might need to cheat and go with four. So I basically have a four-step system that I bring to all my clients and what I do. And then the first layer is data. The second layer is targeting. The third layer is orchestration. And then the fourth layer is messaging. So data, data. I know everybody's data is a mess, but even if you can just carve out a little bit of that data that you can clean up, you're in good shape. You don't have to boil the ocean. Just get some clean set of data that you can then go on to the next step, which is target. So your targeting is building account lists, it's segmentation, it's prioritization, it's tiering, it's all that good stuff, right? Then from there, you create what I call marketable segments. So these are kind of like micro segments within your broader priorities that you can run quick agile campaigns to. And that's orchestration, right? That's, are you multi-threading? Is there multi-channels? Are you multi-sequencing different tactics? And then lastly, messaging has to fit into all of that, right? If you take the same message and just blast it out across all of this, it won't work. I now think messaging has to be completely atomized, and you need unique messaging really for every single one of those steps.
Mm-hmm. That I've got so many questions from that. I'm very conscious of time, but I'm gonna dig into one of them. On the data front, what points are important, right? Like what? Well, I know it varies from ABM
Mm-hmm.
programs. To be fair, I prefer the term ABX as well, but like ABX answer didn't flow as well, so
It's
ABM answered.
marketers, yeah,
But yeah,
marketers and their acronyms.
but the what data, or is there any unique bits of data that most marketers are missing now? Maybe it's like looking into the technographics, firmographics, or
Hmm.
like lead scoring. Like what? Yeah, I don't know. Are there any like ninja bits that you would
Yeah,
really like
I mean,
flag and encourage people to look at?
it's a hard one because I'll tell you, when I go in and audit, say, a mid to enterprise company, it can take 50 hours to audit their entire go to market, right? And you might be looking at over 100 different signals or data points or reports that you're trying to figure out. But for the sake of this, I would say there's one area that I sort of love to go to first, And that's whatever the marketing and sales handoff is. So if you could only pick one, right? It's because that's where all the friction always happens. And it's usually MQL to SQL, or it's MQL to like sales qualified opportunity. But start there and look at that and then compare it to a benchmark and say, is this good or not? And then the second layer, go down below and look at, it's a different by company, but basically sales rejection reason. So you have to know as a marketer, why is sales rejecting your leads or your MQLs, whatever you call it? And I would argue that half of your audience, if they looked at that data, the biggest chunk would be something along the lines of like unresponsive, did not respond, or like missing data. And that tells you right there where your priorities are. If leads aren't
Mhm.
responding, they're not qualified. If you don't have good data, you need an enrichment strategy. And like, boom, that's two things you can do right there. Start to show some value, get some wins with sales and your leadership. So if anybody does that, let me know. I want to hear. I want to hear how it goes.
It all starts with sales.
Yep. Yep.
The question 5 from Drew Smith, founder of Attributor. Honestly, when I interviewed him, he blew my mind because attribution is not my strong point. But
Ooh.
he asked, it's not actually to do with attribution at all, but he asked, what is the best way to do ABM without buying an expensive tool like 6sense or Demand Base? So, like, where would you start with this?
Yeah, so I'll cater this one a little bit more towards the founder startup audience. I would say start with a tool like a Common Room, a Clay, or even just Apollo, right? Get a list, get your list together, and that's going to be based on who you think you're best able to sell to, right? So hopefully you've done some research and some customer research and you've talked to customers and you've got an idea, right? If you get stuck, you can then go to a tool like Ocean.io or Panda Match, right? And then you can get some lookalikes. Get yourself a little list first, and you should be able to do all that for like a couple $100, right? Sign up for these tools for a month and then cancel them after you get your list. Sorry to the vendors, but this is, for startups. So then go and get your list, right? You don't need expensive tools for any of that. Now I would figure out within that list what I was calling these marketable segments. So a marketable segment is you've got this hunch, right? That you're really good for some certain use case, or you can meet the needs of a specific industry, a vertical, a segment, a certain type of buyer, a certain geography, right? Wherever you do really, really well, hyper segment that out and then develop a sequence. And that sequence could be maybe some LinkedIn thought leadership ads. It could be some organic LinkedIn. It could be some engagements ads. Then you might want to follow up with like some outbound email. If you can get them opted in, you could then run some warm inbound email. And then I'd come up with an offer, right? Maybe that's a piece of content. Maybe it's a digital piece of content. Maybe it's actually something you do, like an audit or some advisory kind of thing, and then just weave all that stuff together into the right sequence, run it for a couple of weeks, step back, test it, make some changes, run it again for 2 weeks, and just do that for like 6 weeks and see what happens. And then you can always go to another marketable segment, but that's where I would start right there. And don't spend more than 5,000 in media until you know what your audience really reacts to.
Steve, you and I use the same tech stack, or at least promote the same tech stack. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that great response. Question 6 came from Melissa Alonso. So we got 2 more questions. This one and another one. Smart Cat, and she asked, "What is your this probably should have come as question 2, but what is your practical advice to get leadership bought in to adopting ABM or your ABM campaign?" So I know, and I've had conversations over the Christmas period where people have come to me and asked, like, just grow, okay? Like, we don't care how you do it, just grow. And
Hmm.
their first thought is, like, let's explore ABM. Now, how do you provide enough evidence or social proof or validation to leadership that this is the way to go? Or how do you approach those conversations?
Yeah, this is a great question. And it is tough because it's so company specific, right? But I would say the framework for how I've thought about it in the past and always try to bring it back to you're going to guess at sales, right? So you have to understand, how does your company generate revenue today? And what I mean by that is, what are all of the people, the processes, the internal, external vendors, like all of the steps in how your company generates revenue from if you're a product driven organization, if you're a service driven organization, you've got to understand all of that. And then you need to understand how effective the current way of doing things is at generating revenue. And you need some metrics to back that up. So tangibly, let's say you're looking across the funnel and you think that that marketing sales handoff, let's say MQL to SQL rate is, I don't know, 15%, and it should be 30%. Hammer in on that, right? Go to leadership and say, this rate is 15, should be 30. Let me paint you a picture of what it looks like if it was 30. Here's how much more revenue we would generate. Here's how much more efficient our teams would be. And then you position ABM as the way to do that. So it's more about, hey, I analyze the organization and how it generates revenue. It's inefficient. And I've got this idea to make it more efficient or more better, and I can fix it. And then you paint your ABM picture and use all your fancy marketing terms and slides and stuff.
Yeah, no, we love that. Package it up nicely.
Yeah.
Steve, I'm so sorry. We have overrun. I've got one more question. Are you
Yeah.
okay
Do one more.
to
Yeah. And then I've got a call after it. Let's do it.
So question 7 is, and it's my favorite question ever been asked by Emily York Goldney at Clarify. She asked, if the sky was the limit in terms of budget, what would be your best in class recommendation for a campaign to drive account engagement? So I encourage you to be as unconventional as possible. Nothing has to make sense, but yeah, you can throw the kitchen sink at these accounts. What are you doing?
Okay. I'm going to go. I'm borrowing a little bit from a friend of mine who actually runs one-to-one ABM at a big enterprise. Okay, what I would do is I would personalize, like really personalize every single step in the experience. And then I'd have some massive, like real life experience as an offer or in there. So what I mean is the ads you see are the creative was designed like just for you. So like let's say I'm a CIO of a company. I want that creative for me. No AI tool did it. A designer created that for me, unique to me and my hobbies and my trends and what I like to do and stuff, right? Then when I go and I say I sign up for a demo, I want that demo built for me. Not just some like demo that's like, oh, AI created some custom screenshots. I want that product built for me. Like you tell me how I'm going to use it at my company. And then I would say, let's get me and a couple other experts in the industry that you're selling to. Let's take us out to like Bali or somewhere nice and amazing. Fly us out for 2 weeks. Tell us everything we need to know about our industry. Educate us. Bring in some cool speakers that we like, and send us on our way.
I mean, discussing business after doing a morning of surfing actually is probably the best way to do business, isn't it?
It
Or just
sounds
like
phenomenal.
nice and chilled out. Steve, thank you so much. The last thing I'll ask is, do you have a question for our next guest?
Oh yeah, my question for the next guest would be around the most ABM is kind of traditionally anchored towards acquisition, net new logos and accounts. How do you think that ABM can be best applied to existing customers, and what might that look like?
Yes. No, that's a great question. I love customer expansion. Okay, I will ask away. But Steve, thanks so much for joining.
Right on. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Awesome. Right. Steve.